A man stopped his car on a residential street. A small boy had just been struck. And then the man said the most reasonable thing in the world. He said he would take the child to the hospital himself. He lifted the 3-year-old into his car. He drove away. And from that moment, both of them, the man and the boy, simply ceased to exist. No hospital ever received the child. No driver was ever found. The car was never traced. There was no body, no wreck, no confession, no ransom. There was only an empty street corner, a frantic mother, and a question that has never been answered in more than 4 decades. His name was Sakunosuke Tabata. He was 3 years old, and on an ordinary afternoon in a peaceful corner of Osaka, he vanished in front of a witness in broad daylight under the care of a stranger who promised to help. This is the story of a disappearance so complete that it feels almost impossible. A case where the last thing anyone heard was an offer of kindness, and a mystery that Japanese authorities, to this day, have never been able to close. To understand how strange this case is, you have to understand the world it happened in. The year was 1978. Japan was in the middle of its great post-war transformation, a country that had rebuilt itself into an economic powerhouse in a single generation. The cities were booming, factories ran day and night, and in the working neighborhoods of Osaka, life had a settled, ordinary rhythm. The place was Suminoe Ward in the southwest of Osaka City, specifically a district called Higashi Kagaya. It was not a wealthy area, and it was not a dangerous one. It was the kind of neighborhood where families knew their neighbors, where small shops lined the streets, and where the front door was rarely locked during the day. And it was the kind of neighborhood where children played outside, unsupervised, without anyone thinking twice about it. This is a detail that matters. In 1978, the idea that a child could be in danger simply by playing on their own street was almost unimaginable to most Japanese parents. Kidnapping was something that happened in films or in faraway places. The streets belonged to the children. They ran between houses. They played in the narrow lanes. They wandered a block or two from home, and their parents felt no fear. Sakunosuke Tabata was one of those children. He was 3 years old enough to walk and play, young enough that the whole world was still the size of a few streets. That afternoon, he was outside with a companion, a slightly older neighbor child of about 5. 2 small children doing what small children did on a quiet residential road near the Tabata family home. Nothing about that afternoon was supposed to be remarkable, and that is exactly what makes what happened next so difficult to accept. Because in the space of a few minutes, on a street where nothing ever happened, a family's entire world was going to be taken from them by a man who, for all anyone knew, might simply have been trying to do the right thing. It was the afternoon of March 3, 1978. The 2 children were playing on the road, close to home, the way they had 100 times before. And then a car came down the street. We do not know how fast it was going. We do not know whether the driver was distracted, or careless, or simply unlucky. What we know is that the car struck the 3-year-old. Little Sakunosuke was hurt, and he was not moving the way a healthy child moves. He needed help, and he needed it quickly. And here is where the story turns from an accident into something far stranger. The car did not speed away. That is what you would expect from a hit and run, a driver who panics and flees. But this driver did the opposite. He stopped. He got out. He looked at the injured boy, and he spoke. According to the account that has come down to us, the man said something to the effect of, "There was no time to wait for an ambulance. He would take the child to the hospital himself." On the surface, it was an act of decency, a responsible adult faced with a hurt child choosing to act rather than stand by. In the panic of the moment, it must have seemed like the fastest way to save the boy's life. So the man lifted the 3-year-old, placed him in his car, and drove away. Witnesses said the car headed south, and that was the last time anyone ever saw the little boy. Think about what that offer did. If the driver had simply fled the scene, the boy would have been left there, hurt but found, and rushed to help by his own family within minutes. Instead, the man's offer to help was the very thing that carried the child away from everyone who loved him. Whatever the driver's true intention was, and that is the heart of this entire case, the words, "I'll take him to the hospital," were the last kindness, real or fake, that the child would ever receive. The 5-year-old who had been playing beside Sakunosuke understood, in the way that children sometimes do, that something was terribly wrong. The child ran, straight to the Tabata home, straight to the boy's mother, to tell her what had happened. A car, her son, a man, gone. The mother rushed to the scene, but by the time she reached the corner, there was nothing there. No car, no man, no child. Just an ordinary street, exactly as it had been that morning, as if none of it had ever happened. Her next thought was the natural one. If a man had taken her injured son to the hospital, then her son would be at a hospital. So she began to call, one after another, the nearby hospitals. And one after another, the answer came back the same. No such child had been brought in. No injured 3-year-old. No man carrying a boy. Nothing. Every hospital she reached deepened the horror, because each no meant the same thing. The man had not done what he said. He had taken her child, and he had gone somewhere else, somewhere no one knew. Only then did the full weight of it land. This was not a rescue. This was a disappearance. The police were notified, and the response was serious. This was not treated as a runaway or a lost child. Osaka police recognized it for what it was, the abduction of a small child, and they moved accordingly. A joint investigation task force was set up, operating out of the Suminoe police station. Investigators built a picture from the only witness accounts they had. The car was described as a white sedan, some reports specify a Corolla, that had driven off to the south. The driver was a man of roughly 40 years old. He spoke, witnesses said, in the local Kansai dialect, the accent of Western Japan, which suggested he was a local rather than an outsider passing through. And notably, he was not dressed in a business suit, not the image of a commuting office worker, but someone in ordinary clothes. From these fragments, police created composite montage sketches of the suspect and circulated them. They pursued the case as a major crime. They chased the white sedan, the man of 40, the Kansai voice. And they found nothing. No car matching the description and the movement. No man who fit and could not account for himself. No trace of the child, alive or otherwise. The trail, thin from the very beginning, simply ran out. A whole city's police force chasing a car that had turned a corner and driven into silence. What followed was the hardest part of any disappearance. Not the drama of the event, but the years of nothing that come after it. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and the case that had begun with such urgency slowly hardened into a cold, open wound. There was no body to bury and mourn. There was no arrest to give the family the shape of justice. There was only absence, the specific, endless cruelty of not knowing. At the site, the community did what communities do when words fail them. It is said that local residents placed a jizo, a small stone guardian statue, the kind that watches over travelers and children in Japanese tradition, at or near the spot where the boy was taken. A quiet marker standing where a 3-year-old had last been seen. A way of saying, "We have not forgotten." But the law, unlike the neighbors, does not wait forever. Under the rules in force at the time, the charges connected to the case carried a 5-year statute of limitations. And so, on March 3, 1983, exactly 5 years to the day after the boy vanished, the clock ran out. The statute of limitations expired. From that moment, even if the driver were somehow identified, even if he walked into a police station and confessed, he could no longer be prosecuted for what he had done that afternoon. 5 years. That was the price of the silence. The perpetrator had only to stay hidden and stay quiet, and the calendar would do the rest. And still the questions remained, sharper than ever. Who was the man who spoke in the Kansai accent? Was the accident real, or was it staged, a deliberate way to create a reason to take a child? If it was genuinely an accident, why did the man not simply drive to the nearest hospital a few minutes away? Why did he and the boy and the car all vanish so completely that not one of them was ever found again? A hurt child, a stranger's promise, a white car heading south, and then nothing at all. How does a person, a vehicle, and a small boy disappear so cleanly that decades of investigation cannot recover a single one of them? That is the question that has kept this case open in one form or another ever since.
When a case has so few hard facts, the temptation is to fill the emptiness with certainty. Let us not do that. Instead, let us take the 3 most serious ways to read what happened that afternoon and weigh them honestly against the little we actually know. The first reading is the simplest, a genuine accident followed by panic. In this version, the driver really did strike the boy by mistake, but instead of facing the consequences, he panicked. His offer to take the child to the hospital was a way to remove the boy from the scene, from the witnesses, from the questions, and then to make the whole thing disappear. This reading has the weight of ordinariness behind it. Frightened people do terrible things to avoid responsibility. But there is a problem. A panicking hit-and-run driver almost always flees on the spot. That is the entire logic of panic. This man did the opposite. He stopped, he spoke, he engaged with a witness, and he took the child with him. That reflex explains a lot, but it does not easily explain a driver calm enough to invent a reason and carry it out in front of a bystander. The second reading is darker, that the accident was a cover and the abduction was the point. In this version, the "I'll take him to the hospital" line was never a moment of decency at all. It was a pretext, a socially acceptable way to place a child in a car and drive off without anyone trying to stop him. The genius of it, if it was deliberate, is that it weaponized kindness. No one interferes with a man rushing a hurt child to help. What makes this reading unsettling is how well it fits the behavior. The calm, the plausible words, the clean escape. But it too has a weakness. It requires extraordinary opportunism in a split second, or a level of planning that leaves no other trace. And a truly planned abduction usually shows other signs, surveillance, a motive, a pattern. Here, we have none of that visible. Just one afternoon, one car, one line. The third reading is the one that has attached this case to a much larger and more painful chapter of Japanese history. Because the disappearance was so total, no body, no vehicle, no suspect, this case has been placed on official lists of vanishings where a North Korean abduction cannot be ruled out.
Here, we must be very careful, because this is where honesty matters most. This is a listing, not a finding. During the 1970s and 1980s, North Korean agents did abduct a number of Japanese citizens. That is established, admitted fact. And because of that history, Japanese authorities cataloged many unexplained disappearances as cases where such a link could not be formally excluded. But cannot be ruled out is a long way from was caused by. There is no confirmed evidence connecting a 3-year-old on an Osaka street to North Korea. It remains one possibility on a list, the least supported of the 3 we have discussed, and included precisely because the case is so empty of proof that almost nothing can be excluded. So where does that leave us? Weighing the 3, the deliberate abduction reading fits the driver's calm behavior most closely, while the panic reading fits human nature most easily, and the North Korea hypothesis rests on the weakest evidence of all. But notice what all 3 share. Every one of them depends on the same impossible fact, that a man, a car, and a child could vanish so completely that not a single thread could ever be pulled. That is the true mystery here. Not just who took the boy that afternoon, but how the world simply closed over the space where he had been. More than 4 decades have passed since that afternoon in Suminoe Ward. The statute of limitations expired long ago. The witnesses have aged. The white sedan, if it still exists, would be a rusted relic. And somewhere in Osaka, a small stone guardian statue may still stand near the corner where a 3-year-old was last seen alive. Sakunosuke Tabata would be in his 50s today had he been allowed to grow up. Instead, he remains 3 years old, frozen in the single afternoon when a stranger offered to help and then drove south into a silence that has never broken. The case is, in the truest sense, still open, not because there is a fresh lead, but because there was never an ending, no answer, no closure, just a mother's calls to hospitals that had never seen her son, and a question left hanging in the air of a quiet street. What do you think happened on that road in 1978? Was it a moment of panic that spiraled into something unforgivable? Was it a planned abduction hidden behind an act of kindness? Or was it something else entirely, something we may never have the pieces to understand? Some vanishings leave clues. This one left only a promise and an empty corner that after all these years is still waiting for an answer.